Assad falls, Putin lost Syria, which country is next? Breaking updates from Syria, Georgia, and more. We will talk about several countries, not just Syria and Georgia. And this is what we'll talk about today. Hello there, I'm Elena, welcome back to my channel Enough of Propaganda. Please like, subscribe, share my videos, let's make truth available for everyone. Let's talk about Syria first. And I made a video, Putin's grip on Syria is sleeping, shocking facts you didn't know. And this was the beginning of the information about Syria. You're welcome to watch this one if you're interested how it all started and how it was unfolding. These are the Syrian people who are happy that Assad's regime collapsed, that Assad get kicked out of the country, had to run away from the country, and he's hiding in Moscow, as far as I know. Meanwhile, Russia is claiming that, oh, nothing is happening, Assad's regime didn't collapse, Assad just simply resigned. Does it look like it to you? And let's remember what happened 7 years ago in December 2017. Putin arrived in Syria and he declared, if the terrorists raise their heads again, the Russian army from bases in Tartus and Khmeimim will inflict blows on them that they have never seen before. Today the Russian army is running away, I would say, evacuating, I think it's not quite the right word, from Tartus and Khmeimim and fleeing Syria. We will see today how well is Putin's grip on power in other countries is holding up. Putin's influence in Syria is over. The rebels have brought an end to Bashar al-Assad rule after 13 years of civil war. And basically Assad's family was in power for 54 years. Dictator Assad has fled Syria. Russian troops are fleeing like cowards, and Russian diplomats continue to lie. Here's another example of Putin's so-called geopolitical victory. Russia's aggressive war in Ukraine and the terrible losses there led to diminished Russian support for Assad and his regime. Putin managed to create chaos in Israel when Russia's Wagner group trained the terrorists who attacked Israel on his birthday in 2023. This led to Israel's attacks on Iran, weakening Iran's support for the Syrian dictator. And with the help of Turkey, and with the weakening Iran, and with the weakening Russia by Ukraine and the war in Ukraine, now Syrian people managed to get their freedom. And now we have witnessed the end of the bloody war in Syria and the end of Russia's long-standing destabilizing role in the country, from the USSR era to the crushing defeat of the Wagner forces in 2018, and Russian support for Assad up to now. This is Assad's garage, by the way. And when 90% of Syrians are on the poverty line. Meanwhile, this is a small section of Assad's garage. It's not just the whole garage, this is just a small section. So basically rebels have seized the capital, captured advanced Russian weapons, and put an end to Assad's bloody regime. I hope Putin's regime is next. If you want to know deeper about the Syrian war, I would go to the Ryan Macbeth YouTube channel, for example, and he's actually created even a guide telling about what kind of actions, what kind of groups on the side of Assad, on the side of against Assad, were fighting and are fighting in Syria. And basically there are several major players. One of them is pro-Russian Syrian regime, and Russia defending that regime, and Iran. This is two major players. And on the other side are the factions who are fighting against, and basically Turkey and sometimes even Israel. Rebel groups have entered Damascus, took control of the airport and the state TV building, and the Syrian prime minister stated that he was not leaving and the government was ready to hand over power to a new leadership chosen by the people. And as I said, Assad ran away to Moscow, and despite support from allies like Russia and Iran, which wasn't enough apparently, Assad's government failed to regain international legitimacy in his country. Basically, get rid of Assad. Meanwhile, Russian military forces are fleeing Syria, taking ships and weapons with them, says Ukrainian intelligence. And Russia even dared to ask Turkey for help to take away Russians and Russian troops out of Syria. I sure hope Turkey will not go for it. This is the very interesting post by Tendar. The collapse of the Assad regime is for Russia a far worse catastrophe than most realize. And as it is well known, one of Russia's business models is to prop up dictatorships and so on around the globe. And he's talking about Africa, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Central African Republic, just a few to name off. The Sudanese civil war is even directly kept on fire by Russia. The latest peace process by the UNSC was stopped by Russia's veto. War and suffering are not only good business for the Russian war industry, but the only operational industry in Russia, but especially for their most infamous mercenary group Wagner. And yes, Wagner is still present in Africa, I would say, in addition to this post. And so on. So Russia basically propping up some regimes in Africa, and Wagner received direct control of lucrative deals for mining operations, especially gold and blood diamonds. The exploitation operations are executed in the most ruthless way, with utter disregard to human life, killing locals and foreigners alike, even Chinese workers. After all, this has always been Wagner number one revenue, which is true. I had a whole bunch of videos on Wagner Group, and I researched them quite a bit. This is true. And the main point is that logistically, Russia always relied on the Syrian bases to fly out the riches and fly in mercenaries and equipment, I would say. They always had to pass Hmimim air base in Syria when going in either direction. It is also safe to assume that much of the operations in Africa were coordinated in Hmimim. This is Russian base in Syria. Without this base, all operations in Africa were virtually impossible, or the very least much harder to accomplish. And harder means more expensive. So this business model could only thrive for as long as the puppet Assad was in Damascus, which is, as we all know, is history. And basically, it's the end of Russian influence not only in Syria, but probably in many African countries, because how else they will get there and fly there? And right now, they just simply, they don't have enough equipment and people to prompt Assad regime in Syria. So he can't do it anywhere else as well. Not in Africa, not in Belarus, not in everywhere. So anyone who wanted to get rid of Putin's regime, now is a good time. Another post of the same author talking about the high-speed collapse of Assad regime has left Russians all over stranded. And Russian Z-patriots, I can confirm this post, that they are really whining about Syria and so on. And the worst part, some of Russians' forces get surrounded, and Russians just drop them like a hot potato and left. So much to своих не бросаем. We're not leaving our people behind. They did it in Ukraine, they doing it in Syria. They drop in their own people and run away. And I agree, another Russian military adventure ends in absolute catastrophe. This is interesting video, a little historical video when Russian politician Zhirinovsky was still alive. And he's saying if we won't be in Syria and will not squash opposition to Bashar Assad, all Arabian oil and gas will go to Europe and nobody will buy our oil and gas. And this speaker is saying that if Russia wouldn't come at the time, which was like 2014-15, and wouldn't prompt the Assad regime, well, right now we will have problems with surviving of Russian budget of Russia. What are they talking about? They are talking about that the oil from Qatar could go to Europe, but it's supposed to go through Syria. And if Assad and his regime will not allow, and he didn't allow this to happen because Russia asked him not to, so this pipeline couldn't happen. But now, as according to Jake Bro, that Assad and the Russians are out of Syria, the Persian Gulf states might actually be able to make this Qatar-Turkey pipeline happen. This would help Europe reduce dependency on Russia energy imports, and it would eliminate Iran's perpetual threat against ships near the Strait of Hormuz. I agree. So if people in Syria who just took power will be able to agree between their factions and so on and wanted to build a good country, this would be enormous source of income for them, and they could be actually decent and prosperous country. And this is how quickly propagandists are changing their tune. This is a post of Professor Preobrazhensky. The Assad regime fell just hours ago, so it wasn't a post from today, obviously. And the pro-Assad newspaper, Al-Watan, already wrote, "We were just publishing the messages that were passed on to us. It turned out that they were lies." The newspaper, by the way, has been publishing for almost 20 years, and all this time they knew nothing. How could we know? We were just doing our job. It was the Times. That is all. And just a couple of hours after the fall of the regime, they find out. Suddenly. And they call it for turning the page and working together for the good of the country. Exactly the same thing will happen in Russia after Putin's death, or the fall of his regime. I agree with that. I would really love to see how Simonyan and Solovyov will flip in the air and changing their shoes while they're flipping in the air and saying, oh, we didn't mean that. Meanwhile, Russia State Duma at the parliament has called for granting citizenship to Bashar al-Assad. Yeah, why not? The criminal Yanukovych already there from Ukraine. Oh, why not Assad? Meanwhile, in Syria, rebels releasing people from prisons, and finally they release people from Saidnaya's prison, which is called the Human Slaughterhouse, a symbol of Assad's brutality. Human rights group estimate between 13,000 and 30,000 people have been killed there since 2011. And I just watched the video from CNN. The journalist is there. They're trying to find some secret, hidden underground, red part of the prison where they couldn't find more people. And their relatives in there, the prison is full of people. They're trying to find, and it sounds like they found everyone, but I'm not sure about this yet at this point in time. So hopefully all people will be found in time, and they will survive. The horror what they endured there is unbelievable. Putin is doing in Syria exactly what he is doing in Ukraine. Russian final acts before withdrawing from Syria is bombing as many hospitals as possible. This is a list of the hospitals Russia bombed. This is how Putin's imperial ambition have led to the total loss of Russia's influence in Syria and in the region. Russia and the USSR have brought death, corruption, and destruction wherever they have had control. There are no prosperous, free, and rich countries under Russian influence. None. Russia itself is not a free, prosperous country. And I'm glad that there is hope for Syria now. This is what Moscow KGB is doing for other countries. This is very accurate representation. And I'm glad to proclaim decisive Syrian victory on December 8, 2024. Freedom to Syria. The Syrian people deserve to reclaim their country and decide their own future. At this point in time, as far as I find out through experts who actually know more about Syria than I do, the leaders of the rebels and so on, proclaiming that they will be not as bad as people were thinking about them because of their not good past. They even saying that they're gonna live in peace with Christians and something like the women doesn't have to wear all that stuff on their faces, the fabrics and so on. But this is remain to be seen. We will see what is happening. But in my opinion, Syrian people deserve their freedom. They fought for it and they got it. And it is up to them how to rule their own country. It's not up to anybody else. And finally, maybe, Syria will be ruled by people of Syria, not by Russia, Turkey, Iran, Israel, or anybody else. I sure hope so. We will see. Let's talk about Georgia. This is my video, Georgia 2008 Forgotten War, Putin's Ukraine Rehearsal. You're welcome to see what Russia did to Georgia in the past. Recently, Georgia had elections, which was falsified with Russian help. And pro-Russian people came to power. And people in Georgia are not happy. They are protesting already for many days, several days. This article from November 28th. Georgia's president urged the people, opposition, and diplomats to resist and fight to the end. Because if Georgia will not fight now, they will fall under the Russian influence, and that would be the end of Georgia. So Salome Zurabishvili, their president, legally elected president, standing with her people against Russia. If anyone still had doubts and didn't fully believe that the government would lead Georgia to Russia, today all doubts are dispelled. Today, the illegitimate government has declared the war on its own people. This is what she said in this article. There are violent clashes with the police, and the Georgian people want freedom. Georgian people want to be with European Union. They don't want to be with Russia. They don't want Russian boot on their throat ever again. This is what Georgian opposition leader Georgy Vashadze has to say.
We're not fighting only against Bidzina Ivanishvili, oligarch. No, we're fighting against Russian hybrid war here. They're investing and spending enormous amount of money. They are spreading disinformation. So help us.
Georgian President Salome Zurabishvili addressed the nation, and she said, "A national consensus has been achieved. No one will strip us of our independence, take us back to Russia, or rob Georgia of its European future. The consensus is strengthening, and it is our power." Police in Georgia used unnecessary violence against people and basically beat up protesters and journalists. Police used water cannon against protesters. I have seen footage when police brutally beating up protesters who are on the ground. BBC and Steve Rosenberg reported from Tbilisi.
Climbed up to the windows, looking perhaps for a way in.
Most of the protesters I've spoken to here say they won't give up. They will keep coming out onto the streets until they can secure Georgia's future in Europe.
In the past, I watched the protests in Ukraine, Euromaidan, very closely, and I see a lot of resemblance. For example, Russia using so-called titushki. It's groups who are basically bandits from Russia who came to Ukraine at the time, trying to instigate something during protests and so on. If you watched my playlist War in Ukraine 2014 and my about 6 videos I made on Crimea alone, you could see them and how they acted back then. The same thing they're doing in Georgia. For example, this video showing the Russian or Georgian government, basically Russian puppets, using Chechen and Dagestani fighters from Chechnya and Dagestan, Russia, and wrestlers against Georgian people. But people in Georgia learned the lesson from Ukraine. And a day after mass Titushki attacks, Georgians already formed self-defense groups against the Titushki, mercenary thugs, of the illegitimate violent Russian regime. It will only increase in numbers from now on. Glory to Georgia, you are safe. I agree, glory to Georgia. On December 7th, Salome Zurabishvili, the president, posted that the Russian regime is back at work tonight in Tbilisi, clashing civilians through the streets as they flee terror, targeting politicians, media, artists, breaking down the doors of opposition offices to raid and brutalize politicians inside. So they basically started to go from the streets into the homes and where the opposition leaders are living and so on, and trying to grab them there. And yet, Georgian people are standing strong, and they trying to defend their country, and they don't want to be with Russia. This is how many of them. Look at their faces. These people are ready to fight for their freedom. Putin will lose. Let's talk about few other countries. Kazakhstan. Putin went to Kazakhstan recently. And this is what the diplomatic humiliation of Russian delegation in Kazakhstan, headed by Putin, looks like.
Казахстан – это практически русскоговорящая страна. Ну, сами, наверное, почувствовали.
Putin just said that Kazakhstan is practically Russian-speaking country. You probably feel it yourself. And despite that, the leader of Kazakhstan, Tokayev, started to speak in Kazakh language, which is clear sign to Putin, no, we're not a Russian-speaking country. We are independent country, Kazakhstan. We have our own language, own culture, and we don't want Russian boot on our throat. Even Abkhazia is standing up against Russia. Abkhazia is a part of Georgia, which Russia occupied in that 5 days war in 2008 and pretended is Russian, or kind of pro-Russian. Looks like those DPR, LPR so-called republics, which Russian bandits created in Ukraine after Russia took Crimea and annexed Crimea in 2014. Those two so-called republics were created. So before that, Russia practiced in Georgia and created Abkhazia and South Ossetia, so-called republics inside Georgia, which is basically Russia, Russian puppets. And yet, Abkhaz oppositions say talks under the way after storming of parliament over Russian deal. So, opposition leaders in Georgia's Moscow-backed breakaway region of Abkhazia claimed late on November 15th that lawmakers were mediating as a dispute continued with the region's leadership after opposition supporters stormed the local parliament over a controversial proposed deal with Moscow. This is Abkhazia, this is South Ossetia, those so-called republics which Russia created inside Georgia. I sure hope soon Georgia will be whole again, and these republics will be part of Georgia as it according to international law, because nobody beside Russia, nobody seriously would accept them as independent something. Their full budget, they completely supported economically and otherwise by Russia. They cannot survive without that. Next country I will talk about is Armenia. Armenian Prime Minister insists country has irrevocably broken with the Russia-led GSTO. So basically, Collective Security Treaty Organization, which is Russian response to NATO. And Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan insists that his country's break with Russia-led organization has passed the point of no return. Goodbye, Putin. Another Putin's failure is Romania, when they had fake election, when a guy who appeared out of nowhere, Georgescu, all of a sudden get a whole bunch of votes and so on. But Romania isn't stupid, and Romania's top court annuls presidential election result. So goodbye, Putin. This is what Romania says. The first round of the country's 2024 presidential election process, which was narrowly won by far-right ultra-nationalist candidate Georgescu, amid allegations of Russian interference. And it wasn't just an allegations, it was proven. This is why the court decided, well, we will annul that. I have a video about TikTok, and I explained, with the help of Ryan Macbeth, which I used his information as well in my video, that TikTok is a cyber weapon. It's already influenced the United States, it's already attacked the United States in the past, and now it's doing the same. They attacking Ukraine, and now they're doing the same thing they just did for Romania. 66,000 fake accounts and 10 million fake followers were removed just on TikTok and just for Romania election. The scale is shocking. We are not talking hundreds of thousands of posts, but millions every single day. This is why I said TikTok is not just a social network, it's a cyber weapon, and it was used several times, and Romania is one of the examples. I would suggest to Americans remove TikTok as fast as they can, because in the United States, according to Ryan Macbeth and some other information, the biggest basically news source, I think it was CNN, about 53 million people is watching on the kind of regular basis. And 3 times that people in the United States watching Chinese Communist Party propaganda TikTok. This is what happened in Romania. This post from December 7th. Last night, police officers intercepted a convoy of cars heading towards Bucharest, filled with explosives, guns, swords, and machetes. Cars belong to a pro-Georgescu group of Romanian mercenaries, active in Congo. So far, group leader and some 20 members have been arrested. So, Russian puppets perhaps not gonna give up all that easily. And they ready to use weapons. This side I don't know enough, so it's a bit unconfirmed in my opinion, but I decided to show it to you because perhaps some of you might provide in the comments some more information on the matter. I am not from Romania, but I do know I have subscribers from Romania. And there is more. According to Johnny Ascola, the wannabe strategic thinker, who often backs their own horse, Putin has created global chaos and is now too weak to manage the consequences. And basically Russia became a pitiful pawn of China. And he's going to different countries and so on. And saying that when you create a mess, you ultimately face the repercussions. Putin has extended his reach too far in various areas. And now Russia finds itself basically in the chaos, beyond its capacity to manage and to regain control. Russian situation deteriorated in every front, compared to just a few years ago. NATO has expanded to its largest size yet, now sharing more borders with Russia than ever before. Additionally, Russian economy is overheating due to a war it cannot win. I can add that I have videos on the Russian economy. It's in terrible shape and it's gonna be worse. And nothing Russia can do. And this is not I'm saying. This is saying Russian Chief of Central Bank Nabiullina and basically Minister of Russian Economy and so on. And the biggest corporations in Russia saying the same thing. And Russia is fully committed to Ukraine while being overstretched in other regions. The countries I mentioned to you is not all of it. Consequently, there are turmoil in Ukraine, Syria, Armenia, Myanmar, Sudan, and several other areas where Russia is either facing defeat or has chosen their own side. And Putin could still continue to do what he was doing until he overstepped his boundaries and initiated unwinnable full-scale invasion of Ukraine. After nearly 3 years and despite its full commitment, Russia has failed to invade any of the 23 regional capitals and special status cities that Ukraine held at the start of the full-scale invasion, and Ukraine continues to engage in combat on Russian territory, I am saying, in Kursk region. Russia is so deeply invested in unsuccessful offensive in Ukraine that unable to defend its own borders, forcing to engage in combat in Kursk Oblast, Kursk region, where it has been unable to drive Ukrainians away despite months of effort. An Assad regime failed, and this is in Armenia, what I told you just now about. So basically, Armenia leaving that union, so-called Russian version of NATO, because it's a mockery. Russia, when Azerbaijan attacked Armenia, and Azerbaijan isn't a member of that organization, Russia was talking to Azerbaijan and didn't even help Armenia, which Armenia is the member. So what's the point for Armenia to continue to be the member? More than that, in Sudan, Russia backed their own horse and now is attempting to turn the tide by switching sides, demonstrating that it has no morals or loyalty in its foreign operations. Yeah, if anybody wants to agree with Putin, make with him agreements and so on, maybe they could use a medium or something and somebody who can talk to the dead and talk to Prigozhin. How much Putin's word means and so on. And Assad, he is still alive. You can ask him how much Russia helped him. Didn't help Armenia, didn't help Assad, didn't help, and basically Putin kills Prigozhin. In Myanmar, Russia has once again backed their own side, and now junta's support is struggling. The resistance is making significant progress, and the junta might find it difficult to maintain its hold on power. And Armenia, as I said, also basically Russia is now a puppet of China. Great leadership, great achievements. Russian economy is in a horrible state. So, nothing really good for Russia. Russian demographics is horrible. It's a genocide of Russian people as well as Ukrainians. It doesn't mean that Russia can't create further chaos, and I'll tell about it to you in the nearest future. In his other post, a scholar is claiming that, like a typical cowardly bully, Russia consistently retreats when faced with strengths. And I can say, yes, Putin consistently retreats when exactly like bullies. It's seen in Ukraine, Armenia, Sudan, Syria, and so on. Russia basically lost only warm water port in Mediterranean, and his influence in Middle East, yes, has been taking no action. What Russia did? Did Russia defend their puppet Assad? No, it didn't. Meanwhile, Russia's propagandists in the West attempt to promote its nuclear blackmail, but no one should be fooled. Russia is like a cowardly middle school bully who tries to intimidate younger students but retreats when confronted by stronger ones. And losing in Syria is a huge slap in the face for Russia, for Putin. I am not always agree with Garry Kasparov, but in this case, he's right. No plan equal no resources. Russia's terrorist empire has been degraded to the breaking point by Ukraine. It will collapse completely unless the West once again throws Putin a lifeline with negotiations and deals. Don't let up anywhere. Increase the pressure. Finish him. Putin is weak. Right now he is in his weakest point, and we need to increase the pressure. We need to help Ukraine to finish him. If we giving him a chance to slip away again, Russia is only bring more strength and will attack again. Knowing Putin personally through the people who actually work for Putin and so on, I researched that quite a lot. I can tell that Putin, and Putin himself said that. I have it in videos. I posted in one of my videos when he was asked by the journalist, what's the worst thing for you? What you can never forgive? And Putin said betrayal. And he considered betrayal, for example, right now from Turkish leader Erdogan, because Putin thought in his mind that Erdogan is his puppet or his ally. And when situation in Syria and Turkey basically instigated or helped helped not Assad regime but the rebels, this is betrayal. Putin will never forgive that. Putin never forgive the Ukraine for Ukraine kicked out Yanukovych, and they did not kick him out in the last Euromaidan. I'm not talking about that. Yanukovych ran away. Nobody kicked him out then. But this wasn't just one Euromaidan. It was previous Euromaidan when Putin personally campaigned for Yanukovych to get elected. And when elections were falsified and Yanukovych get elected, Ukrainians protested. It was peaceful protests, and Yanukovych was removed, and the results were overturned. Putin felt like a slap in the face at the time. He never forgave Ukraine for that. It was way before Russia attacked Ukraine or Crimea or anything like that. It was way before 2014. So when 2014 happened, Yanukovych was legally elected. It was another election. But before that, he failed. And Putin never forgave Ukraine for that. And it was one of the reasons why he so want to exterminate Ukrainians, wipe them off the face of the planet. So neither Syria, nor Turkey, nor anybody who helped to remove Putin's forces in Syria and Assad, they betrayed Putin in his mind. And he will never forgive that, and he will try to destroy Syria by any means. And so is Turkey. If I will be Erdogan, I would have been watching my back very much. In the end of this video, I want to recommend to watch what Gabrielis Landsbergis, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Lithuania, has to say.
Right, we're walking in exactly the same situation as we have been with Minsk I and Minsk II agreements after the 2014 aggression, and now somehow we think that this time is different. It's not.
what he's talking about, basically that we can't trust Putin. There could not be agreements with Putin. There could not be ceasefires with Putin. The Syrian example shows that Russia can't be kicked out and will go home. The Baltics were right. The West is strong enough to win. We don't need to fear the bear, Ukraine or anyone else. He's causing chaos. And it's absolutely useless to talk to Putin. I'm telling it time and time again. And every time somebody in Europe sitting in their warm offices with a cup of coffee in hand are thinking that they can't agree with Putin. Putin does not want those agreements. He clearly stated he doesn't. Neither Peskov said. And if he pretend he does, just to please Trump or something, to pretend, the previous attack on Ukraine in 2014 and 15 and those Minsk agreements and so on, there was 29 ceasefires. I have a video why nobody should trust Russian ceasefire, which explains a lot. And the American journalist, Vice News, Simon Ostrovsky was there. 29 times at least. There was ceasefire and Ukraine laid down the weapons and Russia keep killing Ukrainians. It only will help Putin to regroup, to bring more weapons and continue attacking everybody, Ukraine and everyone who can get. Meanwhile, he will work with the puppets and foreign influence, agents of foreign influence, and using all the propaganda tools in his box, trying to split up Europe, trying to create chaos everywhere. I'll make another video on what kind of cards he still have on his sleeve, but we cannot trust Putin, period. There is nothing proving that he can be trusted. On the contrary, it's proven time and time again he cannot be trusted. And any agreements, it's just an empty piece of paper, which Putin will throw in the garbage before even ink will dry on it. So please help Ukraine to win. Please help Ukraine to finish Putin now. This is essential. Thank you for watching. Have a great day. See you later. And learn the truth and stay informed.